The air in Cairo is thick, not just with the heat of the midsummer sun, but with a strange electric tension. It is July 1324. In the bustling markets of the Al Fustat district, the street vendors are used to chaos. But today, the noise has changed. It is no longer the sound of haggling, it is the sound of disbelief. A man leans over a wooden stall, his hands trembling. He holds a single gold dinar. Yesterday, this coin could buy a family's grain for a month. Today, the merchant shakes his head. He demands 2 coins, then 3. Behind him, the crowd is swelling. Thousands of strangers have arrived from the west, trailing the scent of expensive musk and the dust of 1,000 miles. They aren't soldiers. They aren't invaders. They are pilgrims. And they are carrying so much gold that the very concept of value is beginning to melt. In the center of this golden storm sits one man. He is silent, draped in silk, surrounded by a private guard of 500 men, each carrying a staff of solid gold. He believes he is performing an act of ultimate piety. He believes he is sharing a blessing. He has no idea that by sunset, he will have accidentally wiped out the life savings of every person in the city. He has no idea that the markets of the Mediterranean are about to seize up. How does one man become so wealthy that his mere presence acts like a financial nuclear weapon? How does a gesture of pure generosity trigger a decade-long depression? This is not a story of a conqueror or a tyrant. It is a story of a man who had everything, gave it away, and in doing so, broke the world. This is the story of Mansa Musa, the richest man who ever lived, and the day he accidentally destroyed an empire. To understand the tragedy of 1324, we have to understand where this wealth began. We have to look at the Mali Empire. In the early 14th century, Europe was a fractured mess of plague, local feuds, and muddy backwaters. But in West Africa, a massive, sophisticated superpower was quietly breathing. Mali was a land of 300 cities, anchored by the legendary Timbuktu. Mansa Musa was not born to be the king. He was a deputy. In 1312, the previous ruler, a man named Abu Bakr II, became obsessed with the edge of the world. He took 2,000 ships and sailed into the Atlantic Ocean, never to be seen again. Musa was left with the keys to the kingdom, and what a kingdom it was. The economy of Mali was built on a simple, brutal geographic reality, the salt for gold trade. To the north, in the Sahara, men carved slabs of salt out of the earth. To the south, in the forests of Bambouk and Wangara, gold was so plentiful it was practically a weed. Musa sat at the center of these two scales. He didn't just tax the trade, he owned the source. At the time, historians estimate that Mali produced half of the entire world's supply of gold. Every coin in a merchant's pocket in London, every gilded icon in a cathedral in Rome, there was a high statistical probability that the gold had started in Musa's dirt. Musa was not a greedy man. By all accounts, he was a scholar, a devout Muslim, and a sophisticated statesman. He saw his wealth not as a hoard, but as a tool for soft power. But there is a danger in that much concentrated power. When one person owns half of a global commodity, their smallest movement creates a tidal wave. In 1324, Musa decided it was time to fulfill his religious duty. He would perform the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. But a king of his stature doesn't just travel with a suitcase. He travels with an entire civilization. His caravan was a city on the move. Imagine 60,000 people stretching as far as the eye can see across the dunes of the Sahara, 12,000 servants, 8,000 soldiers, and most importantly, 80 to 100 camels, each carrying 300 pounds of pure gold dust. Here is the financial mechanism that no one saw coming. Musa was a generous man, fatally so. As he marched through the desert, he didn't just buy supplies. He built a new mosque every Friday. He gave handfuls of gold to every beggar he passed. He bought every luxury the local merchants could offer, paying whatever price was asked. Think of it as a massive, unregulated stimulus package injected into tiny, fragile local economies. By the time he reached Cairo, the word had spread. The king of gold was coming. The merchants of Cairo, the smartest financiers of the medieval world, saw him coming and licked their lips. They thought they were about to have the greatest business quarter in history. They were right. But they were also about to learn a lesson in hyperinflation that would haunt them for a generation. Musa spent 3 months in Cairo. It was the peak of his life and the peak of Mali's global reputation. He refused to meet the Sultan of Egypt at first because protocol required him to kiss the ground. He was a king who knew his worth. Eventually, they met as equals. Musa sat on a throne of gold and spoke of the wonders of the Niger River. But while the kings talked politics, the streets were drowning in gold. Musa's followers flooded the markets. They bought everything: silks, spices, slaves, jewelry. Because they had so much gold, they didn't haggle. They paid over the asking price. They tipped lavishly. In a matter of weeks, the amount of gold circulating in Cairo increased by an estimated 25%. In economics, we call this a supply shock. When you suddenly double the amount of money in a closed system, the money doesn't make everyone richer. It simply makes the money worth less. The price of grain skyrocketed. The price of meat became unreachable for the average citizen. The gold dinar, the standard currency of the region, collapsed in value. Musa thought he was being a saint. In reality, he was a central bank with no interest rate controls, printing money in the middle of a crowded room. The first signs of the disaster appeared before Musa even left the city. The advisors to the Sultan began to realize that their treasury, which was held in gold, was suddenly worth significantly less than it was a month ago. The purchasing power of the state had evaporated. The people who suffered most were the quiet ones: the laborers, the teachers, the widows, people who lived on fixed incomes or small savings. Their gold was now just heavy yellow metal that couldn't buy a loaf of bread. Musa, to his credit, began to realize what he had done. There is a documented moment on his return journey where he tried to fix the disaster. He began to borrow gold back from the Egyptian merchants at high interest rates. He was trying to mop up the excess liquidity he had dumped into the market. It was the first recorded instance of a single man attempting to carry out a contractionary monetary policy on a continental scale. But it was too late. The damage was done. The gold markets of the entire Mediterranean, from Morocco to Italy, remained depressed for 12 years. Musa returned to Mali as a legend. He brought back architects from Spain and scholars from across the Islamic world. He built the great mosque of Djinguereber, which still stands today. He turned Timbuktu into the intellectual capital of the world. But the seeds of the end were sown in that very wealth. By putting Mali on the map, literally, he was featured on the famous Catalan Atlas holding a golden nugget. He showed the world exactly where the treasure was hidden. He had created a target. After his death in 1337, the empire began the slow, painful process of fragmentation. His sons could not manage the scale of the economy. The neighbors, specifically the Songhai Empire, looked at the wealth of Mali and saw a prize worth taking. But more importantly, the gold shock of 1324 had changed the way the world saw money. It proved that wealth wasn't about what you had in the ground. It was about what you could do with it. We live in an age of billionaires. We see individuals whose net worth is larger than the gross domestic product of entire nations. We often wonder, what is the limit? Mansa Musa is the answer to that question. He was a man of immense character, a man of faith, and a man of peace. He did everything right. He shared his wealth. He invested in education. He didn't build an army to conquer. He built a caravan to pray. And yet, because he held too much of the world's value in one hand, his simplest gesture of kindness became a catastrophe. The lesson of the gold pilgrimage is a sobering one for our modern markets. It tells us that systemic fragility is the shadow of concentrated wealth. When the system is too reliant on one source, one person, or one commodity, the richest man isn't just a success story. He is a single point of failure. Mansa Musa's gold eventually left Egypt. The markets recovered. The mosques he built remained. But the world never forgot the time a single human being walked across a desert and, with a smile and an open hand, accidentally brought an economy to its knees. Final screen. Mansa Musa's wealth, adjusted for inflation, is estimated at over $400 billion.